Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Doctor of the Future. I'm Dr. Krystosik, and you are listening to the podcast that teaches you how to unleash the healing power of your body without drugs or surgery. Our call to action here on this podcast springs from a very important quote from a visionary, Thomas Edison, nonetheless, who way back in 1903 said this, and I quote, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame and diet and the cause and prevention of disease." Wow, what a quote. And so we here on this program firmly believe that natural medicine should always be used first and drugs and surgery last, especially when it comes to chronic disease. Natural medicine is the state of the art choice. You know, here in this program, we're not against drugs or surgery, but we are opposed to the overuse of them. The Doctor of the Future, this is the place where suffering ends and where knowledge begins. And the good news is your body is self-healing and self-repairing. When you take action, guess what? Health appears. That's right. And that's what's really exciting. That's why I'm excited about bringing this podcast to you, because we have thought leaders here on this program from around the world. Each week, I'm going to be interviewing these people and be sharing with you these visionaries because they're leading the way for drug-free medicine. They want to teach you how to use food as medicine and herbs and what we call lifestyle medicine. I'm talking about exercise and stress management and proper mindset and being able to really just look at your life as a whole and how you can be proactive. That's what this program is all about. You know, these visionaries, these people are changing the face of medicine. They're the movers and shakers that's revolutionizing the way we treat disease here in this country. And I want to tell you, their research and their discoveries and their clinical experience that they're going to be sharing with you and how they treat, their patients, and they do the research with all this natural medicine. They are literally focusing on something that is very paramount to what we believe in this program, and that's above all, do no harm. And always work in cooperation with nature. That's really important. And you got to understand the breakthrough discoveries that these visionaries are bringing to us each week. They're not being reported in the mainstream media. I can guarantee you that. They're not being talked about at your doctor's office that's using drugs and surgery. However, they are being prescribed by doctors who use functional medicine and natural medicine, what we call complementary medicine or alternative medicine. There's a lot of names for it, but it doesn't matter what name you use for it. It's all based on cooperation with nature and understanding the body heals itself. And we want to unleash that power. And today, we're going to be continuing on part 2 of our 4-part series of my interview with Dr. Galland. He's a medical doctor, researcher, and a leading authority in functional medicine for years. He's written many, many books and well respected around the world. And we're going to be talking about how to understand COVID and the natural ways you can help to use food as medicine to help to protect you from this virus. And Dr. Galland says very clearly in the first episode, he said this virus is not some terrible monster that we have to fear. He said this is a virus that's mutating, and we've been dealing with viruses for a long time. So Dr. Galland approaches this from 3 different perspectives. Number one, the asymptomatic period. That's when you don't have the virus. You're trying to protect yourself from it, and you can do a lot of things to use food as medicine to help to protect your body from this virus. And the second stage of the virus is when people have the symptoms. They're not severe, but they're in some of the mild symptoms of the COVID. And the last stage is the severe infection, which can be very, very fatal even. And so you don't want to go there. And so there's even things that Dr. Galland talks about can help in that last stage. So there's 3 stages, and he's going to clearly define what you can do at each one of them. And you know what's really exciting is that just recently I came across an article that was reported from the University of Alabama. And there's a Dr. Baudry there who's doing some research, some pretty exciting research on a supercomputer that can take data from around the world and be able to concisely collect all this data from around the world from all the years of research that's been done on plant compounds, all the research studies that have been done, and there's thousands and thousands of them. And this supercomputer is so fast that if you took the entire Earth's population, that's about 7 billion people, and if you took each one of those 7 billion people and they were doing 20,000 calculations every second, that's the kind of storage capacity that this supercomputer has. And you can literally store this in a high definition video for 45 years, all this data, which is pretty amazing what technology can do. So we're using technology to fight COVID-19, and we're using it in a new way, using this artificial intelligence to take advantage of ancient healing techniques and knowledge about foods and herbs and how to prevent viral infections like COVID-19. And make sure that we get a foothold before the virus gets a foothold in us. And the body has the ability to take this knowledge that we've been sharing with people from around the world for thousands of years and be able to incorporate it into a winning strategy to fight against this virus. Dr. Baldry says that even 5 years ago, using this supercomputer and gathering this knowledge like this would not even have been possible. So that's how fast technology is advancing. So many of the data strategies that Dr. Baldry and his associates have found are medicinal plants from around the world, and they've collected around 200 of them, and specifically about 125 of them that have distinct advantage against the COVID-19 virus. And they come from Asia and South America, and yes, even right here in the United States. And we'll talk about some of those things here today with Dr. Galland. So even some bacteria in the ocean and fungi, scientists are uncovering some pretty amazing discoveries about these natural substances. So plants are a vital source to fight against the COVID-19. And it's really interesting because scientists are taking this information from these supercomputers about the advantages of plants against the virus, and they're then literally finding these compounds in the plants that we call phytochemicals, and then trying to isolate them to make a drug. Of course, there's big pharma coming in and trying to take advantage and make big bucks when you can get the same advantage from the plants, but nobody wants to talk about that. And we'll investigate that a little bit further and see what some researchers say about that. So I just need to remind you that food is the best medicine, and that's what Dr. Galland keeps on bringing home to us. And he's going to be talking this week about compounds found in plants that are called phytochemicals. And just to recap what we talked about last week, what Dr. Galland talked about, he talked about 3 specific enzymes. One of them very beneficial, called ACE2. And he talked about how that enzyme is so critical to our health of many body parts, including the lungs and the heart and the kidneys, and in helping with diabetes and metabolic syndrome, which we'll talk a little bit about, which is a chronic condition that's affecting over 35% of our population today. The population has this thing called metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of high blood pressure and obesity and high blood sugar levels, and a combination of several things together. 35% of the population has this syndrome today, and that's why so many people in this category are susceptible to the COVID-19 virus. So one enzyme, ACE2, is very beneficial, and we need to do things to support that. And scientists have actually done research, and since January, there's been over 700 peer-reviewed studies on ACE2 to try to help to figure out how this key enzyme can help to be the answer to knock out this COVID-19. That's how important this enzyme is. So we need to protect it. And the virus tries to block the ACE2. That's what it does. And once it blocks ACE2, then it can unleash its hell on the body and it can replicate and duplicate itself. So we want to make sure we keep ACE2 intact. And as we age, ACE2 gets less of a quantity in our bodies, but we can ramp that up by eating the proper foods to help to build up ACE2. And that's what Dr. Galland's going to do. He's going to teach us what foods will help to build up ACE2. So I don't want you to get scared about the big words that Dr. Galland is using. We'll talk a little bit more about that because just keep it simple. Remember, food's our best medicine. And I'm going to try to simplify it for you by putting up on the screen when Dr. Galland talks about these things, where you'll find these compounds in plants in food. So that's the bottom line. The ACE2 is important. And then the other two enzymes that Dr. Galland talked about last week is furin and the 3CL protein, which literally helps to unleash this protein on the virus's spikes. The virus has this spikes on it. You might have seen it in the news or some pictures of it. They call it like a crown on the virus. It looks like a crown. But those little spikes that come off are the proteins, and this 3CL protein unleashes those proteins, breaks them down, and then lets these other smaller protein particles come out and attack the cells in the human body. So we want to make sure we block this 3CL protein and minimize what furin can do inside the body, because the furin makes the virus more sensitive. So we don't want to let the virus take advantage of the furin, and we don't want it to unleash the 3CL protein. So that's important. We're going to talk about how to block that. And Dr. Galland's going to give us strategies to help us to see how we can protect ourselves so the virus doesn't take advantage of the furin and doesn't literally unleash its 3CL protein to then make it dangerous so it keeps on replicating. And so we're going to learn about strategies to block it so the 3CL doesn't then cause devastation inside the body. So remember, just keep it simple. And like I said, don't be scared by these complicated words that Dr. Galland is going to be talking about, these compounds in foods. Because remember, food's your best medicine. And Dr. Galland's going to be talking about flavonoids and polyphenols and luteolin. These are compounds you're finding in foods, like luteolin's found in celery and thyme, the herb thyme, and green peppers and chamomile tea. And then he's talking about bioflavonoids, which are in citrus fruits and green peppers and lemons and limes and oranges and cherries and grapes. And then he'll talk about quercetin, which is a very concentrated source of this bioflavonoids you're talking about, which you'll find in broccoli and citrus fruits and yellow onions and red onions. And he's going to be talking about how these foods are protective against COVID-19. It's really interesting that Dr. Galland talks also about how quercetin, again, a bioflavonoid found in plants, is being studied in China by scientists to treat COVID-19 as a drug against COVID-19. Again, you can find this in foods, and you can purchase quercetin at a supermarket or a health food store as well. So whenever Dr. Galland talks about these plant compounds like quercetin or luteolin or any other ones, I try to put them up on the screen and show you where you can get them in foods. And scientists have literally discovered over 5,000 of these phytochemicals, these isolates in plants that protect the plants from microorganisms that might attack the plants and other invaders in the environment around the plant. It protects the plants, but it also could protect us, which is pretty exciting. And so many of these foods and plants and herbs you're already using, folks. You're using, probably some of you are using ginkgo biloba. Now, Dr. Galland doesn't talk about that, but it's a traditional herb that's used for memory. but it has a compound in it called ginkolide, and it's a strong uh, uh, phytochemical that'll stop this 3CL protein and stop the virus in its tracks from replicating, and so it doesn't damage more cells. So garlic is another compound. It's got allicin in it, and allicin has promising antiviral properties. So plants have compounds in them that protect the plants, and they can help to protect us. And these plants have these substances in them that protect them from their environment. And they're used extensively today now around the world to treat human diseases. And it's one of the leading natural sources of natural substances to help to treat illnesses, including things like COVID-19. And now more than ever, because bacteria and viruses are building up a resistance to the drugs, these researchers are telling us that plants and the compounds they have are even more important. So the metabolites in plants, the compounds, the isolates, help to block these enzymes like 3CL and help to ramp up the ACE2, which we want to do. And it really is important to listen carefully to Dr. Galland, how he gives us insight, how ACE2 can help us and how we can stop the progression of the virus by blocking the 3CL protein and also the furin. So I just really encourage you to really pay attention to what Dr. Galland said, because I found another article. I got to tell you about this. There's another article by scientists in a peer-reviewed medical publication called Frontiers in Medicine. And this is published just in August of 2020, just a month ago. And in this review article of all these very, very detailed information on COVID and how it operates and how it damages the body, these scientists were saying that the metabolites, the individual substances inside of plants, are strong and safe candidates to treat COVID virus. And the antiviral properties of these metabolites in the plants are something that we really need to be using, because, again, the drugs are becoming less capable because the viruses and bacteria are becoming more resistant. But here's what the scientists tell us. They say, without establishing, and I'm quoting right now, without establishing a drug pipeline for developing these herbs, without making clinical trials to use them, they're going to just become, these plant compounds are just going to become articles in journals, medical journals, and they're going to be shelved as herbal formulations in grocery stores and supermarkets and in health food stores. And they're going to be used in natural medicine for a select few people, but they're not going to be used as a modern drug. So it's important to understand that these scientists are telling us, this is what they say, undoubtedly the plants are underutilized as a source of compounds and to get and to contain the virus, to cure the people from this virus, and they're hotspots to fight against the war against these microbial invaders like COVID-19. So it's important that you really pay attention to Dr. Galland today, understanding what he says, and try to just listen, because I'm going to again recap for you next week and really help you to understand the advantages of the compounds, the plant compounds, and the foods you can find them in. Take advantage of those. And I'll again make it simple for you next week and review it so you understand it a little bit better. But again, the scientists in this article of the Frontiers in Medicine, this is what they said in conclusion. They said plants are dramatically underutilized as a source of compounds, and they have broad spectrum antiviral activities, and they need to be explored and utilized. And doctors need to find out about them. Dr. Galland, we applaud you for bringing this to our attention and all the research you've done about how to utilize food as medicine.
And this is something that the virus uses to damage cells so it can escape and move on to the next cell. And there are a number of nutritional strategies for inhibiting the 3CL protease. And what I've created primarily for my patients is a program that addresses these three enzymes nutritionally in a stepwise pattern, depending on what's happening in this person's life. That is, if you're in quarantine and you're at very low risk of exposure at that time, you don't necessarily need to be addressing the 3CL protease in a vigorous way, but it is helpful to be following strategies that increase the resilience of your own ACE2 and build up in your body some of the polyphenols and some of the flavonoids that your body needs to inhibit the enzymes that contribute to the damage. And those tend to build up very slowly over time because flavonoids and polyphenols are not necessarily well absorbed. So I have a dietary recommendations and exercise recommendations and supplement recommendations that would be used in that stage where you're not likely to be exposed in the near future. If you're in a situation where the risk of exposure goes up, and once the country starts opening up and there's much less of this stay at home and quarantine, there's going to be another wave. That's inevitable. Then I think it's worthwhile incorporating supplements that are standing by to inhibit furin and the 3CL protease.
Yeah,
And
I know you're a big proponent of food is your best medicine, and I know you've got some surprises for us on how we can enhance, the ACE2 enzyme. So let's talk about some of those things that you recommend, because I think our audience is really kind of sitting on the edge of their chairs right now.
Okay, well, a lot of these things are things that are not a surprise to anyone who has followed natural medicine or functional medicine or integrative medicine. From a dietary perspective, probably the worst thing for ACE2 is high fructose corn syrup. ACE2 does not like a high fructose environment. The fructose that's
Which
naturally
is what most
present,
Americans are eating.
Yeah, right, sure, absolutely. And
So it's a prescription for disaster, what Americans are doing, really.
yeah, it is. Obesity is another factor that impacts negatively on ACE2 and is one of the major risk factors for getting sick with COVID-19. It's up there with high blood pressure and diabetes. So this whole epidemic of metabolic syndrome that we've witnessed in this country, that sets people up to get sick with the diabetes, hypertension, metabolic syndrome problem, sets people up to get sick with COVID-19. Now, it's not the only factor, but from a social and population-wide perspective, I think it is one of the reasons why we have such a high rate of serious infection in this country. Some of the protective factors, exercise is protective, aerobic exercise, but even more so, high-intensity interval training has been shown to boost ACE2. And, of course, you have to be in good health or good shape to do that, and I wouldn't just jump into it hoping that you're going to avert getting sick.
People could just walk and still get some benefit, though, right? They can still walk.
Yeah. Aerobic exercise, a healthy anti-inflammatory diet. So from the perspective of diet, the factors that are important, well, number one, nutritionally is vitamin D. I think from what I've seen of the data looking at vitamin D levels and morbidity and mortality with COVID-19, that if vitamin D insufficiency were eliminated in this country, the burden of this illness would be reduced by 50% or more.
There's a lot of good data to show that bacterial and viral infections are dramatically reduced when you have adequate vitamin D levels, correct?
Right. Yes, yeah. And specifically for this virus, I mean, it's true in general because of the influence of vitamin D on the immune system, but specifically for this virus, vitamin D supports healthy ACE2 function. And it's one of the reasons why vitamin D deficiency is associated with metabolic syndrome, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer. I mean, all of these things work together to create susceptibility to illness. And of course, this is something that we've known for a long time. It just doesn't get incorporated into the kind of fragmented medical care that we have.
Yeah, I know you're big on resveratrol as well. I know.
Yeah, so I haven't actually over the years been a huge fan of resveratrol for its anti-aging and weight loss benefits. But when I started 3 months ago really taking a deep look at how this virus operates and what can support ACE2, resveratrol was one of the natural substances that leaped out as an important supporter of ACE2. It works well in conjunction with curcumin.
Yeah, you know, Dr. Galland, really interesting. Back in 1990, I wrote a book called Nature's Prescription for Illness, and it was specifically a book all about grapeseed and grape skins and the anthocyanidins that are found in there and how it decreases inflammation and helps to fight viruses. I wrote that back in 1990.
That was, yeah, you were way ahead of the curve on the flavonoids at that point. And yeah, I think I got interested in bioflavonoids sometime in the late 80s, and I was amazed at how much research had been done and how little it crossed over even into nutritional medicine at that time. Mm-hmm. So I think you really nailed it there, because the anthocyanins and other flavonoids are very important as part of the diet. And additional polyphenols, rosmarinic acid, which is found in spearmint and oregano and rosemary and thyme, and some other spices, that has significant benefits in supporting ACE2.
Well, you know, Dr. Galland, since you had mentioned the rosemary and thyme, and of course, you know, you said parsley. I know you're really a big proponent of eating parsley. By the way, why do you like parsley so much? Talk about parsley. Why do you like that so much?
I like the apigenin that's concentrated in parsley, and which has anti-allergic effects. I mean, I got into it also has effects on the gut microbiome, the apigenin, and on weight loss. But I wouldn't say I have a single favorite flavonoid.
Okay.
I like
I want to make sure I got this list of herbs proper, okay? Because you mentioned, you know, parsley, sage, rosemary. Let me see if I got this right.
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and luscious red silver between the salt waters and dusty strands. She's so good, then she'll be a true lover. Sleeps unaware of the clarion call.
Now, do we get that list of the herbs that were really good, or did we get it right?
Yeah, spearmint was left out.
Oregano too.
Oregano and spearmint.
Now, did you like Simon and Garfunkel?
Sure, who didn't?
Did you ever go see them live?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you know, interestingly enough, their music, as I'm sure you realize and you experienced it lifted our spirits, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't that include them as one of the doctors of the future? Because, you know, mind, body, spirit, right?
Absolutely.
All
yes.
right. You see, I just had
music is definitely part of the medicine of the future.
I had to divert just for a second on that. Okay. So you're talking about the herbs that help to inhibit the furon and to enhance ACE2.
Right. Well, for inhibiting furin, there were two things that clearly have an impact that are natural products. One is luteolin. Luteolin is a bioflavonoid. It's found in a number of vegetables, celery is one, for example, and I wonder if, there's been this big craze about a celery juice cleanse and celery juice diet. I wonder how much of the benefits that people report on that are due to the luteolin content,
Mhm.
the celery. I generally have recommended luteolin as a supplement to get high levels up because that inhibits furin and
Is that the phytochemical that helps to decrease blood pressure as well in celery?
Um, I'm not sure if I haven't seen any data on luteolin reducing blood pressure.
Because
But it's certainly possible.
celery's actually been used in hospitals actually to help to reduce blood pressure. I've actually had some studies on that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. When you take a food, there are going to be multiple phytonutrients in it, and it's unusual for the effects of the food to translate to one. But if I had to choose an ingredient in celery that has fairly profound anti-inflammatory effects, it would be luteolin, and luteolin inhibits furin, and it's also
So that way that
very
the
safe.
virus won't attach to the ACE2. It won't stick to it.
Right. Luteolin actually coats the viral surface and proteins and prevents them from attaching, but it also inhibits this enzyme furin that kind of carves out the protein to allow them to attack. The second product in terms of preventing viral furin activity is one of the Chinese herbs that has been my favorite over the years called andrographis, or Andrographis paniculata. It's used a lot in traditional Chinese medicine. The andrographolides that are considered to be the active components inhibit furin. I usually save that for high-risk situations or if people are just starting to become symptomatic. But those are important early strategies. As far as inhibiting the 3CL protease, and I'll save most of those strategies for when someone is sick, because if they haven't already gotten infected, 3CL protease isn't occurring. It's kind of meaningless. There are several. There's a Chinese herb called Houtunia cordata, Houttunynia, which has anti 3CL protease effects. Quercetin, which is one of my favorite flavonoids, has anti 3CL protease effects. And actually, quercetin is being studied in a clinical trial in China now for the treatment of COVID-19.
Well, it's also anti-inflammatory, right? It's an anti-inflammatory.
It's anti-inflammatory, and quercetin will inhibit a whole lot of different enzymes. That's the thing about flavonoids that I first realized when I started studying their biochemistry, over 30 years ago, was that the right flavonoids will inhibit almost any enzyme that you want to inhibit, and stimulate certain enzymes.
I just love that. That's why food is our best medicine. I mean, we find those flavonoids in food, and it's just exciting, and you've done so much research to just show the benefits. It's amazing.
Yeah, and also in terms of 3CL protease inhibition, black tea. And so, folks, I'm really glad that you stayed with us to hear the complete presentation of part 2 with Dr. Galland and how to effectively approach and be able to really win the battle over this COVID-19. Dr. Galland is giving us great insights on how we can use food as medicine. So I encourage you to come back next week, hear part 3, and understand that here on the Doctor of the Future, we're going to continue to bring you leading edge scientists from around the world. Not only scientists, but laypersons and people who have great insights about how we can use natural substances, how we can use lifestyle medicine to help to protect our loved ones and our families and our friends and ourselves and to make our immune system stronger using all the resources that nature has provided. So I just really want to just encourage you, and I want to applaud you for being here and taking the time to listen to this whole presentation. And I encourage you to come back next week. Until then, I want to just really wish you a good, healthy week. And until then, I'm Dr. Krystosik, aka Dr. J, and here's to your health.